Welcome back. This is the second half of the Video 5 series session. And in this section, we're going to be talking about the daily operations process and the sub-processes that fit underneath the daily operations. Let's get started. All right, so we want you to follow along with us in this workbook. And if you haven't already done so, please go ahead, open the workbook and jump into on the operational process and procedures, and then click on the daily operations process. All right, with that loaded, this loads our daily operations process page. And here we're just going to talk a little bit about the daily operations process, the purpose of this process, and some of the pieces that tie into this process. It's pretty straightforward, Richard. Really is, we're just going to be kind of focusing a little bit on how to staff, so doing some of that shift staffing, scheduling, problem change procedures, looking at shift turnover, and just kind of getting into some of the more day-to-day operational human side of these processes and procedures. In this section, really, this is kind of a placeholder section. It's a place to put, the responsibilities around the daily tasks of security operations within the staffing of the analysts that fit within the SOC. This is also where we talk a little bit about the operational activities that they must accomplish within a given 8-hour period. This process is also tied to any of its subordinate processes or procedures. This is going to include the staffing, monitoring, shift turnover, problem changes, all of those pieces that I've kind of called out, and how they fit into this procedure. So in here on our shift staffing and scheduling procedures, we want to make sure that we have the appropriate staffing, and we want to establish a standard shift schedule. This may tie into a managed service provider, and how a managed service provider may have a follow the sun model, a 24/7 model. They may have a lot more resources, and then they may escalate to resources that are within your business. Or you may have an in-house follow the sun model, or a model that is, broken out by shifts and broken out by those that, fill those shifts. So I want you to kind of think about that. And this is just to kind of tie back to kind of that 8x5 operational monitoring, and to cover through those shifts who's going to be monitoring and how you're going to rotate your analysts through that staffing and scheduling. We want to make sure that you're helping to reduce burnout. We want to make sure that you're reducing overlap, and that you're also providing opportunity for those that need to take time off, or even building into your staffing and your scheduling around sickness and other types of things that may creep up into your business that affect those employees that are going to be driving your SOC. So this is kind of where that this portion, we highlight that. So this is kind of, again, this is the daily operations process. This is kind of the process summary and the overall. We'll get into the nitty-gritty here in a minute. We also cover problem and change procedure. This is going to tie into the type of standards that you may snap to for change requests or change process, or issues and problems that you may see arise. Things around, monitored security devices or low priority alerts, anything that's related around security operations technology, anything that may change daily operational and introduce problems into the daily operations that an analyst may face. So making sure that they're aware of what that change procedure is, making sure that they're kind of snapped to that, and so they know when there is a production freeze, or when certain changes into production are being made, or when there may be changes to network devices or other devices, apps and services that may impact a business, that may show up as possibly a security incident or a monitored alert, when in fact it was actually related to some type of problem change or change control, and it maps to these type of procedures. Shift turnover procedure. This is really where we take a look at the standards to turn over the shift. You're bringing in someone who's replacing another analyst, and what that shift replacement looks like. This is, again, ties back into the shift log and documenting the activities and the things that we've talked about in our previous sessions, as well as making sure that we ensure the appropriate information exchange happens during that shift turnover, so that there is no gaps in that information sharing or any gap in the type of activities that has occurred so far on a given incident. And then last but not least is kind of the daily ops call procedure. And this really is that call, right? Every SOC, as you're thinking about SOC maturity, will stand up some type of a daily ops call. And this call can be, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. It doesn't have to be long, but it's the type of a call that is, you're pulling your people together and you're providing what we call situational awareness. And the situational awareness provides a wider audience of the type of important operational and analytical security information on a day-to-day basis, so that an analyst isn't caught off guard when they see certain things that show up, that they're called to action and to go do those things, right? They're already aware, they've already been read in to some of those things. They have that situational awareness and they're ready and primed to take action whenever that action is called upon on their behalf. All right, that pretty much covers this section at a high level. We do also call out a couple of KPIs here. We talk about incidents per analyst hour, right, or IPA, right, and incidents triage by category, personal KPIs, as well as any service center tickets and overall KPIs, but that may pertain to your incident response team and the way that they're delivering on those KPIs. And then last but not least, roles and responsibilities, again, were applicable for this section. Fantastic. So let's step into the daily ops meeting and we'll deliver on that. Again, this is another placeholder. This is, we kind of give you a description, but we kind of give you some steps and an agenda. It's a place for you to kind of flush this out. Your daily ops meetings may look different than what we've called out here in this section of the workbook. That's okay. Feel free to come in. Again, this is just markdown. Make any changes or edits and make sure that you're putting in the right type of requirements, agenda, and steps that you want your analysts taking, and any situational awareness that you want your analysts to be aware of as those pieces arise, right? So in this particular instance, in this example, we're talking about parties joining the daily operations call, on that meaning SOC analysts, senior SOC analysts. If we need a representative from the incident response team, great. If you have a managed service provider, you're pulling in someone from that team to sit in and provide situational awareness that they're aware of, and or sharing any situational awareness that you bring to the table from inside the line of business that your MSSP may need to be aware of. So all parties are logged in. They are part of that shift log. They are a part of the daily operations call. They have they know what that agenda is, and that SOC manager is leading that daily operations call, right? Or someone with some type of leadership capabilities within your organization that's driving your agenda, driving these daily operation calls, creating that situational awareness, whether that's in-house or partnered with consultants or partnered with, managed service providers where appropriate for your business. And then we give you an example of an agenda, certain things around operational call-outs, significant activity or upcoming operational events. These could include things that are, change control requests, things that are happening within production, any lockdowns or freezes into production, things that are happening around threat and vulnerability scanning or pen testing exercises. We also call out analytical, things where we're updating on daily analysis, merging attacks or threats that we're seeing to our business that maybe we've not seen before, certain different types of tactics, techniques being deployed on the environment. And as we continue to evolve the shift log and we're evolving the way that we're tracking incidents and we're growing in our knowledge base, Those types of things then become part of the daily operations call. This is important, right? Because now it becomes knowledge sharing. We can share that knowledge and make sure that we're transferring that knowledge from team to team, and we are making sure that we're expressing that knowledge across a wider range of audience of folks within the business that can help provide any additional context and or provide any additional information regarding threats and indicators of compromise or indicators of attack that we may see. And then last but not least, we've called out here an open discussion. Bringing forward issues and concerns is always critical. Being able to be an active listener is so important in this growth part of the daily operations call. We want to have that growth mindset. We want to be thinking about what those concerns might be and any other related items where applicable. And we want to be thinking about how can we apply the process framework and the things that we know that we need to do in our daily work efforts to put those back into the open discussion, the threats, the things that we've discovered, the things that we've discussed, the things that have been shared, right, to make us all better. That's really what this is about. It's about lifting each other. It's about elevating each other. And we only do that through collaboration and through knowledge share. Next here, we're going to step into problem tickets and change controls. Again, this is another placeholder. This is about initiating a trouble ticket, what that might look like on the SOC side of the trouble ticket. Couple of categories that we've called out here is when the issue will be resolved, or used when the issue needs to be resolved by someone within the team. Maybe this is something that is elevated through the managed service provider down into your team, or maybe this is something that's led out through the line of business, right? Whatever the case may be, we want to make sure that you're flushing out what steps you want folks to take around initiating a trouble ticket. What does that look like? All right. And then initiating a change control. If there are changes that need to be made, does the SOC have a voice? Are they sharing things that they're seeing that they can give back to the engineering teams, back to the service owners and the production owners within those lines of business because of the monitoring that they're seeing to be able to affect positive change, right? Again, we want that mantra of do no harm, but we certainly want to make sure that because we're seeing things in a very unique perspective, that we have a voice during change control procedures, that we have a seat at that table, and that we can provide that level of context and a voice around those change controls, especially if we see a change control that may have an adverse effect on the type of activities and the things that we're monitoring within the SOC. We also want that level of a voice, both on the positive side as well as on any side that may lead to some type of an impact, whether it be to doing the job as a SOC analyst, right, or to the line of business. Next, this is the shift staffing schedule. One of the things that we should probably call out here, Richard, is we have a techcommunity.microsoft.com blog on shift staffing and how it relates to Sentinel and to Teams. There is a fantastic blog that's in the V2 of this workbook. We're already working to incorporate a lot of the goodness from that. But that really kind of works through how to apply at a practical level the type of shift staffing that a lot of security operations teams are looking to deliver on to make sure that they're accommodating multiple types of shifts and analysts and workloads, schedules, vacations, sicknesses, all of those things. But that's really kind of what we're doing here. In this particular model here, we've got something we've called out here a temporary staffing model. This is a model that's centered around more of that 8-hour extended business working hours. This isn't a follow the sun model. It's not a 24/7, 365. This is more of kind of that 9 to 5 operational, maintaining adequate monitoring. So depending on how large or how small your business is, and depending on how many resources you are to provide this level of staffing, you may see that you've got a smaller set of resources to leverage. That's okay. Our recommendation really is do something, start somewhere. And even if that means that you're starting off small with 1 or 2 analysts, and that operational runtime for them to function as a SOC analyst may be minimal, that's okay. Again, start somewhere, start small. So in this particular instance, we're kind of talking about that temporary staffing model. This is really where we're pulling in SOC analysts to monitor for 2 to 4 hours at a time. And then to alternate actively monitoring the SOC triage instance, as well as performing other SOC analyst duties, some of which we've talked about was the subtle event process, getting in and doing data exploration and hunting, and providing additional context to some of the things that we've already seen in the hunting blade, or the incidents blade, excuse me. And within that incidents blade, we may leverage that to drive the type of other KQL queries and data exploration that we want to go after, right? So there's a lot of opportunities that SOC analysts can dive into from both the monitoring side as well as other analyst duties, were articulated through this type of process.
This is really good to see. Yeah, I've seen a lot of different patterns and practices, and I think there's no one way to do anything, right? But knowing that there are different ways gives you alternative ideas. So we've got blog posts. I would also recommend you would just look at other security professionals in the industry that might want to share their expertise as well, and teach you different ways that you might want to plan and unplanned. Like I'm sure everyone knows from COVID last year, hit a lot of companies and this year still in the way that they have to change to working from home. And that's not the way a SOC used to work at all. It used to always be in a physical building. So good to see.
You're so right. And I think with the way that COVID hit us, it really changed our mindset. It changed us that, well, if we can be home and we can be delivering on the same type of incident response excellence, then why not, right? I mean, I can still log into the portals and the tools. I have access to the things that I need. I've got a working internet, right? But I want to make very, very sure too that if you are working from home, that you're shoring up your local internet, that you're shoring up, right? There are certain things that you want to make sure that you're doing at home to protect your business, so that if you are working on sensitive data and sensitive materials, that doesn't get leaked through, something that you're doing at home. So just being mindful of that as well is important.
Absolutely.
We call out a couple other things here: planned absence, unplanned absence, all of which are owned by the SOC manager or by some business leader within your business that will take on the accountability and responsibility of these things, right? So kind of planning out this, looking at what this might look like, even if it's in a temporary model basis where you've got a few folks a day that are working on this, what does that look like? And making sure that you're partnering with them and building this out, understanding when there is a planned absence, what to do, how to make sure that you're still covered, even under a temporary staffing model. And then if there is a planned absence, again, making sure that even under a temporary staffing model, you're still covered, right? So that those folks still get the time that they need, whether that's, mental health, physical health, whether that's vacation, whatever the case may be, you're being there for your team, and meeting their needs, so that when they're here and they're working, they're meeting the business's needs as well. And that's important. All right, shift turnover. This is also pretty straightforward. It's really about that dissemination of knowledge. That's really what shift turnover is really all about. You're taking information, you're providing any call outs, new incidents that have been created, any open tickets, things that are assigned to the SOC or assigned to the incident response team, any teams that you're working outside of incident response, any significant operational activity and analytical information as it pertains to the activities and the things that you've already done within your daily shift. And then you're reviewing those pieces, right? You're looking at the action item log. You're looking for filter, requests. You're providing more information around the shifts and things that need to be immediately completed, like intelligence reports or email from other SOC analysts and or the SOC management, and reviewing any nightly updated emails. So all of these pieces kind of are cyclical. They, rinse and repeat through shift turnover, and you're looking at what was happening in the previous shift log, acknowledging that they've been completed, acknowledging that you've accepted them as is, and then you're adding to them until the next shift turnover, where you again rinse and repeat these steps. This is another placeholder. This is another place where if these steps are, not flushed out enough, feel free to make any additions that you feel are pertinent to your line of business. Things that, as you're thinking through them, if you want to be more granular and add some additional tactical information into these steps, you could certainly do so. But at a high level, really, we're trying to give folks an opportunity to think about what they should cover, where they should review, what they should look at from an immediacy perspective, and then bringing all of that together as you rinse and repeat this cycle. On the weekly operational process, this really is kind of at a high level. It's intended to guide the weekly operations. It's to provide significant number of critical subordinate operational procedures and or documentation that ties back to the standard weekly tasks that support an effective SOC. That's really all this is. It's another placeholder just to kind of get you thinking about what things may look like from a daily to a weekly to a monthly operational process. So you may have things that you're going to do every single day, and those tasks are going to cycle in and out. But then those pieces are going to, dovetail into what that weekly is, as you're doing maybe a more weekly review. How did the previous week go? What does that look like? Activities across all the shifts, situations where you may run into gaps in the shifts, gaps where certain incidents may have fallen down or fallen through the cracks, where some of the processes may not have been implemented correctly, where analysts are still learning or growing. And so this gives you an opportunity to review and reflect. That's really what this is for. It's for that review and reflect of what's going well, what isn't going well, how do I modify, what do I change? How do I take that feedback and turn that feedback into learnings, and then apply that back into the daily operational tasks and procedures and the things that your analysts need to be doing, following up with those analysts and making sure that their daily tasks are meeting the objectives, right? That they're communicating effectively, they're escalating effectively, they understand the actions they need to take, they understand when they need to reach out and escalate to a tier 2 or a tier 3, or maybe to an incident responder, if they need to do a crisis response or call out. Whatever the case may be, whatever the process they need to follow, it's your time to really look at the weekly operational process as a reflection back on all of the activities across the week and where things could be improved. This is also where we're going to create that weekly threat intelligence report, right? That weekly intelligence report is going to come from threat intelligence that may be during incidents, right? Intelligence that is gathered during the investigation phase, things during bookmarks, things that you're not necessarily seeing through your threat intelligence provider, things that you didn't necessarily read on the news or bring in through a standard way of communication within your business. No, this is really about how you can take all of these things that we've talked about so far and really turn them into a report, turn them into actionable data that you can build back into those daily operations and really mature the process over time. So that's at a high level, that weekly threat intelligence report. Here's a couple of examples. So this really is a landing page of examples. This is a great place to just, maybe if you want to leverage this as where to place your threat intelligence report, you could certainly do that. Or if you have a different way of communicating your threat intelligence report on a weekly basis, you could certainly use that medium. That being said, we wanted to provide those that are adopting this workbook with real world examples that they can kind of snap to. So in here, we call out things like statistics and issues, things around, there was an Azure AD outage that occurred on March 15th due to a number of SQL reads. This was global. This was across the board. There were 220 Azure Sentinel instances that were opened and 74 were closed this week. There was a large spike in TCP traffic that was observed on April, right? Statistics and issues. Things that we can gather that we can maybe make actionable. Maybe, if that large spike in TCP traffic is due to 3389 and RDP sessions, maybe this is time to go deploy just-in-time access, to those resources. Is this something we need to enable to mitigate a large spike in port 3389 traffic? If there are, other types of statistics that we're noticing, do we need to go open a live stream session within Sentinel and maybe go watch that activity to see if any pattern emerges, right? We can make these things, these statistics and these issues actionable. And then key articles of interest, things that are happening in the wake of resurgence. There was a US CERT that issued an alert about Drydex and a little bit of information about that. If you click the link, this will open up into a URL so that an analyst could go and read more about that. They could read more about the FBI, security vendors partner for the Drydex takedown. Again, more information on that as well. So that's really what we're doing here, is we're giving you a lot of ways to think about what that weekly threat intelligence report might look like, where we may pull certain information out of the daily logs, things that we're noticing out of the daily tasks, and the things that are being provided by the analysts, and then turning those in to statistics, measurements, and ways to action on that data as a threat report.
Very cool. I think for those reports, you got to think of your audience as well, right? If it's the executive suite or business users, they might not want to make it too technical, and also making sure it's relevant to your business, your region, your industry, etc. There's a lot of attackers out there. There's a lot of campaigns out there. They don't all mean they're going to be a risk to your business, but the ones that you should be watching out for, you want to make sure are raised to the top of that list. Absolutely.
Love that.
Yeah, this is great.
All right, we have two more we want to cover. We've got reporting process and then the periodic reports. So the reporting process kind of flushes out the process itself, and then as a sub procedure is our periodic reports. This kind of gets into the tactical portion of the reporting process. So let's dive in there. The reporting process is designed around the lead SIM engineer. So a lot of folks that deploy a SIM, like Azure Sentinel, will have some kind of an engineer that will design, update, and maintain the type of required analytics, reports, and or workbooks within Azure Sentinel. And the analysts then will provide any type of comments, summaries to that SOC workload as needed, and on a regular basis partner with the engineering team to produce better analytics, to produce a report, to produce availability and access, right? So these are really critical to answering business questions about, personnel performance, how things are working within the SOC efficiency, looking at whether or not analytics are performing as intended. Are we getting enough true positives versus false positives? Do we need to modify any of those analytics? Do we need to look at other security operations and threat statistics, vulnerability statistics? Do we also need to look at like KQL query performance? Do we have issues where there is performance, concerns on the way that a KQL query was crafted for a particular analytic? or for a workbook, right? Or even for a hunting query. So keeping in mind all of those things. So really what the periodic report procedure sets out to do is to establish a standard that these reports can then be run on a regular basis. And that could include daily, weekly, monthly, to report on or to produce actionable information as it relates to security operations, threat statistics, vulnerability statistics, and even query performance. So we want to make sure that we're thinking through the documentation from that perspective, looking at it also as in conjunction with use cases and how those use cases are being applied. And the lead engineer is then responsible for these, for these reporting efforts, and we're tying these pieces together. So that's kind of the high level of how we're thinking about this section. Metrics around reports and document and present and metrics. These things could be, we do have a workbook that we're going to get into a little bit on the business side, where we can look at the analytic efficiency. This is something that I think that a lead engineer would lean in more on based on this role and based on this process of the framework, that they would take into that more consideration of how well something is working and how efficient it is within this process. Then we call out roles and responsibilities, who owns what, where, who's executing daily, and then that lead SOC engineer is responsible for any successful completion of these reporting processes. If you have applicable policies and standards that you want to snap to, we've given you a section to be able to link those policies and standards and put that under in this section. So feel free to add it or to add, feel free to add or edit this section and make it applicable to your line of business. And then down below, we give you a placeholder for process linkages. So any subordinate procedures or reporting that are related to this process and procedures, feel free to provide any additional linkages here. That way, everyone knows kind of where to find the policies, the standards, as it pertains to these type of periodic reports and who owns them, where they may be. So you may have more than one lead engineer or SIM engineer working on various different pieces of that, depending on how large you may be, and you may want to call out who owns which portion. If you're still small, right, this may fall to someone in the SOC, right? Or this may fall, I can tell you at internal at Microsoft, we did for a time where some of the analytic pieces were ours as an engineering team, and then eventually the SOC kind of took some of those pieces over and they started doing some of the design portion and the reporting portion and really started handling some of those pieces. And so it could move, right, depending on who's going to take on that workload and who's in the best position in your business to handle that workload and drive the right value. So let's get into the tactical portion, the periodic reports. This is kind of a placeholder. This is where you would store that SOC weekly threat report, any instructions that you may have, any archives. Maybe you're leveraging OneNote, or OneDrive. Maybe you've got some other type of archiving tool or URL. You could certainly store that here, wherever that may be, or whatever that may look like. This really is kind of that placeholder for you to start storing some of those pieces, right? Its purpose is for you to be able to keep an archive, right? It's that cyclical piece of that reporting. So now you're not losing those lessons learned. You're not losing that knowledge share. This would be a great repository for you to spin up new analysts as they're getting onboarded, having them look at those periodic reports, looking at lessons learned, reading them in on certain incidents, certain things that happened through crisis call out or escalations, helping them get familiar with the way tabletop exercises work with pen testers, understanding different schedules, really being able to consume all of this information and then apply it in their daily tasks and daily operations. Well, this pretty much concludes the second half of our session video 5. This is the daily operations portion. There's a lot here, but there's also a lot to be considered where individuals may feel like they need to focus a little bit on the customization of some of these things and kind of flush out where they may want to store things, or where some of these daily operations may fit into their overall processes and procedures. But that's what's so great about this workbook is we've thought through why you need that, what the purpose is behind it, but we've not given you everything. We've given you a lot to think about so that you can snap it to your line of business and really customize it, really make it your own, really make it applicable to the way that you want to operationalize your security operations, no matter how small or large you are, within your current line of business. So with that, Richard, I will turn it back over to you.
Great. Thank you, Rin. Great information. Glad we're getting this all down into this video. So join us on the next one, and we're going to go through business processes and procedures. See you then.